All right, hello again, YouTube. I will try to put this up maybe on Monday or Tuesday before we do KCD2. So if you're watching this, probably it's next week. This is Tim Cain, how to receive criticism. You get really angry and you stamp your feet, and then you don't admit you're wrong and you go back to work.
Hi, everyone.
Oh shit, it's
It's
loud.
me, Tim. Today, I want to talk about how to receive criticism.
Hi, Tim.
I basically want to talk to you about what you should do when people are being critical of your work,
What if I'm never wrong, Tim? What if they're wrong? What if they're always wrong about everything and I'm always right?
or even your opinions. Now, if you've watched this channel at all, you know that I do not think my games are perfect. Far from
No,
it.
no game is perfect.
I'm not just talking about the bugs that are in them. And there were some doozies. There were some, pretty horrific crash bugs and slowdowns. But I'm talking about even the design bugs that were present in the game when they shipped. That I
Well, I think. Sorry, Tim. Let me go back. I think that it's every game is going to have a smattering of problems, right? It could be design, it could be art, it could be the level design, whatever. The systems, it could crash all the time, and it's very easy as a gamer to point at a game and list its problems. But as a developer, you are also aware of these same problems, but you don't want to point fingers at your team members, right? Because that's not really going to make anything better. Pointing, saying, "Oh, our game crashes too much. Why did you do this, programmers?" It doesn't really help anyone. The programmers are probably also aware of the crash bugs too. So I think I try to only take responsibility for the bugs and issues that I am responsible for, right? Of course, I've worked on games where there are crash bugs and there are glitches and whatever. It's just it wasn't my responsibility to fix those, and yeah, it's like I wish the game would be better in those ways, but I'd rather talk more and be more responsible for the things that I know I did cause a problem with, which was the design, right?
were present in the game when they shipped that I didn't even like when they shipped. And I think I've talked about things, in Fallout and Arcanum that I didn't like when they went out the door. Some of them we changed, like the timer in Fallout,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them never got to change because they were never prioritized, and that would be like how much spells cost in Arcanum, and even just the whole spell system needed a balancing pass. And you may be thinking, well, how could the game ship with you not liking those things if you were the one in charge or one of the people in charge?
Time.
And
Usually
I've tried
it's
to answer
time.
that in different ways. The biggest reason that games go out with things that the designers don't like is priority. You, at some point, you run out of time, and by that I really mean you run
Money.
out of money,
Mm-hmm.
and you just have to ship. And
Like I think that a lot of gamers forget that there are still, especially, I mean, it was more common back then, but it's still relevant nowadays that there are release targets that you do a big marketing push. You spend a lot of money on marketing, in some cases as much or more than the game's development itself. And that marketing is all about putting into people's head the window or date for release. You can't just start releasing trailers and not talking about the game, because then people don't know. They're like, okay, great, another video. Still, when does it release? Tell me when it releases so that I can plan around that, or I can expect to, spend money at that point. And you build up a whole marketing campaign to say, okay, our game's coming out August 20th, August 20th, August 20th. Uh, and if you miss that target, not only, especially the more hype your game has, the more people probably are going to be upset that the game didn't release at that time. You might have also fucked over investors who were expecting money before, quarter four of that year. They were expecting it in quarter three. You also you might have messed up your physical copies that are now have to be stored in a warehouse by a certain point, and then you have to build a day one patch that's going to go out, and everybody's going to have to download a 20 gigabyte day one patch. It causes so many problems. You don't want to miss your target. That is the worst case scenario, is making a delay, because that costs way more money than just the salaries of paying people for another 1 or 2 months. No, it can cost everybody money, including marketing, physical stuff, certification. It all adds up. So, yeah, as much as it sucks to say, you release a game with a few bugs and issues and then hope that you have time to fix it after you release it. That isn't always the case, but you just gotta get the game out the door sometimes. And it isn't a question of, well, let's delay it. It's more like, no, we don't have any more money to delay it. We are out. This is it. We need the money this month, or the company shuts off its lights. We cannot get more loans. We cannot borrow more money from investors. This is it. And we'll just make the best of it.
When that point approaches, you prioritize things.
Mm-hmm.
So for most of my games, we were prioritizing fixing literal crash bugs,
Yep.
and any bugs that prevented you from
Regression
finishing the
blockers
game.
and stuff like that.
So
yeah.
if we weren't fixing crash bugs, we were fixing bugs that could get people halted on the main story quest line, or things that would happen if you made a build a certain way and then suddenly you found out you couldn't advance. Those are the things that I prioritized. But it still means that things ship the way I didn't want them to.
And the sad part about that is that oftentimes these companies who, in many cases, prioritize money over the customers getting the truth, it's almost this horrible catch-22 where, okay, in order to fix these bugs and make the game that we intended to make, we need as much money as possible so that we can spend the time on it. Well, if we tell the players the truth that this game is going to launch in a buggy state, we're going to have fewer sales. And because of that, we won't have as much time and money to spend fixing the game. So what do? They lie to your face, they make things up, they make bullshit cinematic trailers that don't actually show any gameplay in order to get you as hyped as possible. They sell you the stupidest things like 3-day early access for $20 more, day one DLCs, progression boost, whatever they can to fleece you out of your hard-earned money in order for them to, continue working. And say what you want. Maybe some of these companies and developers are really passionate about what they do, and you wouldn't mind giving them that money or supporting them in that way. But in most cases, they're not run by people who are passionate and care about you. They're run by people who just want that maximum amount of money and are willing to, instead of add 3 months more to the production buffer in order to get the game released in a better state, would rather just cut 3 months from production and get the game out in a buggy state, knowing that people will still pay for it. And I think that's really, really stupid, in my opinion. I will say this, if we get a publisher for making games, I will just tell you if there's a problem. If it's like, okay, I think that this build is gonna be kind of shit. Like this, we have this bug and this bug that we can't fix until that point. So we're gonna delay that release because of these bugs. But if we're not allowed to, I will just say, yes, you know what? This build has some bugs, and we're going to try to fix that in the first week. Do not buy it if you don't want to have those bugs. Buy it after the week when we have the hotfix out. I'd rather be honest about it because I think that the long-term benefits of being honest to the community are much better than the short-term losses of being honest.
Didn't want them to. It's also the case that some of my games were so big and just had so many things in them. Things, and by things I'm saying items.
It's a lot to manage.
Text on the items, or the icons on the items, or lines and dialogue.
Especially for the only person in charge.
Names of things. Just, you don't see everything that ships in a game. You can play it a dozen times. I think I played Outer Worlds 16 times, but you still don't see everything.
Yeah, there's no way that one person or even 10 people can possibly test a larger open world RPG like that compared to 100,000 launch players or something, or let's just say like 10,000 50,000 launch players. Inevitably somebody's going to do some crazy stuff or try to break the game purposefully and discover a bug that you never found because you just didn't even think about doing that weird crazy combination. It happens.
And if you don't see it, you can't make a change in it. And that's the second reason. But the third reason things ship with things that I don't like is it's not true that I'm in charge of everything. I've never made a game where I had 100% final approval on everything that was in there. I didn't want e-registration in Fallout. I didn't want the Temple of Trials in Fallout 2. Every one of my games had something in it that pretty much someone told me to put in, or that someone put in and then wouldn't let me take out. So
Been
I'm
there.
just saying, if you plan to get into game development, or if you already are, you're going to make a game that ships with something in it that you don't like.
If you want to get into professional game development, yes, and I think that's one of the things that uh, a lot of indie developers stay indie because of that, but also a lot of indie developers fail to get a professional career because of that too, where they like to have that control, they like to have that say, but aren't willing to capitulate and, and find compromise with other people who do have the say. It does suck. I mean, I've been there. I've had publishers. I get it. I've had bosses. I've had, people who sometimes say this has to be in there, this has to be this way, and it's like, well, okay, I will grumble and be frustrated on my own time, but I will still do what you want me to do.
That you don't like. And then once it ships, a lot of people won't like it, and they're going to start making
Yep.
critiques. So this is sort of a video on what you should do with that criticism. In a way, you can view this as a companion video to the one I made on giving good feedback, which I'll link below, or as a companion video to any of the 3 videos I made on how I would remake some of my games. I did one on Fallout, one on Arcanum, and one on Temple of Elemental Evil. And if you look at those videos, they're full of things that those games shipped with that I didn't like, and things I'd want to change if I were to make them today.
It's a bit of what like you have a postmortem for. You get the team together, you don't pull any punches, and you just voice what went wrong with the game and the game's development, and what you should have done, and what you plan to do for the next game, and how you plan to improve. Postmortems are really important. I could give an example. I shouldn't know this information, but I'll say it. But I'm not going to reveal any names of anything. I worked on a game once where I left before the game was fully finished or whatever, or let's just say it was finished, it was released. Um, but the team hadn't done a post-mortem yet. And I was really looking forward to being part of that. I was not part of it, unfortunately. Um, I learned, I had problems. I had real big problems about the game's production and about the game's design that I wanted to bring up, and things that I wanted to fix. And I wasn't going to hold any punches during that presentation. I'll tell you that. I heard later that they didn't want the smoke. No, they didn't. They knew who I was. They wouldn't have wanted this. But the reality is, the truth is the truth, and I just want to make good games, and I want to do it correctly. So I heard later that somebody did the presentation in my place, but I hadn't really given them any information about things that I think could have been fixed or wrong with the design because, bad terms, right? Apparently, that individual just went up into the presentation and basically just talked about all the good things that the design team had done, and how they were very proud and there weren't any issues. And it's one of those things where it's circle jerk post mortem. That's pretty much exactly what it was. And I'm not too surprised to learn that they haven't really learned from their mistakes. That's one of the reasons I left. Let's put it that way. Imagine you were more vocal throughout development. I was one of the most vocal, yes. I was blamed for lowering the morale of the team simply by bringing up problems that I had with the development of the game. Like, I wasn't pointing fingers. I just said, look, we're stuck in this position now because we made this mistake back then. And, for the next game, let's make sure we don't make that mistake. Well, they would just deny that mistake was ever made. There's like, no, that was, we never did that. No, we did do that. We did it. It's right there. It's right in the logs. We made this mistake. We didn't qualify this correctly, and therefore we did something completely wrong that ended up having cascading debt that we had to pay back, or that we failed to pay back entirely. I don't know. It was one of those things where they would openly lie to people, just blatantly tell employees the wrong thing in order to make them not feel upset. They would just, without any question, tell you a lie in order for your morale to not be lowered even a little bit. And you see some sort of process change that would fix the issue and just get some hand wavy answer and nothing ever changes, pretty much. or they would just for the mere question of bringing up problems that I had with the development, they would label me disloyal. What was the mistake? Um, it really all what I traced it back to because I when I was doing working on the game, I wasn't super knowledgeable about production. Otherwise, I would have raised these concerns earlier, right? But on that kind of that afterthought, once we were nearing the end of the game, where I had some time to breathe and analyze how did we even get here? Why are things so fucked up? It all boiled down to improper pre-production. It was a case of mislabeling and misqualifying what a vertical slice was and what a prototype was, and they were just dates in a calendar. So our vertical slice was just a date that we hit, but we never actually asked ourselves as a team and with the product in mind, is this actually our vertical slice? Like, is it up to snuff? Do we have all of our pipelines solved? Do we have all of our tools made? Do we have everything implemented that's going to be in the final game in a way that is ready to show if we wanted to show this on like a trailer or a demo? And the answer was unequivocally no. In fact, I would only say we had maybe 15 to 20% of those things finalized by the time that that date for vertical slice came about. And we just passed it. It was just one day it was okay, our vertical slice is due tomorrow. Today our vertical slice is due. Now we're in alpha. And it's like, well, what does this mean? How do we actually qualify what an alpha is and what our game should look like at the end of alpha? And yeah, it was trash, and that alone meant that we were still working on tools throughout development, like through an end of beta. We were still uh developing features all the way up through the end of the game that we didn't prototype because we didn't have time to prototype, and we were iterating on and making mistakes with systems that we had already tried to finalize. And then in the meantime, we had to just keep cutting and cutting and cutting in order to actually get the game to release. So there were, a good maybe 50% of the systems that were just half done and working in some, minimum viable product way. The game released, it's not horrible, but it's also a shell of what it could have been. And so I think what they had a problem with is that I said the problem is with our production at the most fundamental level. We need to overhaul the way that we produce games because that's where this is stemming from. We need to have these qualifications for what it actually means to have a first playable, to have a vertical slice, so that when we reach those points, we can say, yes, we're here, or no, we're not here because we're missing this thing, and this thing. They didn't like, in my opinion, they didn't like to hear that that they've been doing production wrong at the very core, in my opinion and in other people's opinions. So they just hand waved that away, especially because the person, that I was bringing this to and with the CEO was also the head of production. So I was basically saying that, hey, CEO, the person you've put in charge of production has been doing such a horrible job that the reason you're struggling as a business owner is because of this person's experience. So the vertical slice prototype was poorly defined. It was not even defined. So poorly defined, yes, but actually it was just never defined. It was just a date in the calendar that we were supposed to hit and have certain features ready for. But those features that were in the vertical slice they were MVP, they were prototyped essentially at that point and barely working and very hard coded. So, then it's like, okay, now we have to struggle to actually finish this system after the milestone just passed with the system, that where we were supposed to have the system fully finished. And that's basically, we were just playing catch up the whole time and had to leave system after system, feature after feature by the wayside because there wasn't even enough time to finish what were already supposed to have done. Yeah, it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. Let me pour another drink. Give me a second. Ooh. There was something else I wanted to say about that, but I can't remember at this point. I don't know. If I remember it, I'll let you know, but I think that was just about it. All right, let me play Tim here.
So, What is my advice on receiving criticism? Listen to it. Read all the reviews that come out on your game and read comments that people leave on Steam and other game forums. You don't have to follow all of it. In
Yeah,
fact, not all of those criticisms are going to be good.
no, they
Some of
won't.
them aren't even going to be right.
No, but you need to know what people are saying and what people are thinking, especially because, and you should show people that you're doing that too. And that's one of the things that I think you can either show people directly through your actions, right? You can either just people report a bug and you fix it. I think that some form of intercommunication is better, right? Because let's say that a new hotfix comes out and there's a bug that you added with that, obviously unintentionally. You should immediately reply the moment you can confirm it that, okay, here it is, it's in our pipeline. That way, people who are, that's all you need to say. You only need to say it once, and in most cases, that's enough for it to spread throughout the community. Somebody else might mention it in a new thread, but inevitably, somebody who's seen the news that you're going to fix it can say, oh, they mentioned they're going to fix that in the next thread. And you can save yourself a lot of time and a lot of anger where maybe it takes 1 month to release that fix for that issue, or not 1 month, but like 1 week. Now you have 1 week of people just saying, we reported this issue. Hello, developers, idiots. Hello, fix the bug. We reported it 1 million times. So having some sort of intercommunication that you're actually, you've seen this issue, you're going to look into it, you have added it to the list, you're going to fix it, is, I think, incredibly important to do. If you type in actually !progress into the Twitch chat, let me see if we can find a link to it. We are setting up, still in the process of setting up, a public issue and feature tracker for our game. So I'm still working on this. However, this will allow you to track our progress with our game live and publicly. And I would like to have something like this throughout the rest of development, including once we find a publisher. There might be some things, I might have like a secret board for, things that we don't want to spoil, because there could be a lot of spoilers here. But at the very least, we want to have a public board for like issues or bugs at the very least. My team to triage bugs is a pain. I literally put a link in the auto messages that takes you directly to the docs on what to do to triage. People still either don't do it or don't know what to do. It happens. But yeah, I think receiving feedback not just from players is really important, but how you communicate with that feedback too. It's a struggle though. I don't think everybody's good at it. It just requires that you can be patient, that you can communicate well, that you don't sound too corporate. But also, I think that how to receive criticism as a developer is important too. There's a lot of internal strife that can come. But I'll say it this way. It doesn't matter if you're a developer or a gamer. Most people want the game to be good. That's why they tell you bugs, is so you can fix them, so that their pain doesn't have to be suffered any longer, and new players don't have to suffer that same pain too. And if you keep that in mind, if you're like, okay, I understand this person's upset, you want the game to be good, let's start from that perspective. And, try to calm people down, try to do a little bit of mediating and, smoothing over.
People make some of the oddest criticisms that just make you go, that person's having a bad day, or the lens they choose to view the world made them look at this game in a way that it's saying something that it's not.
By the way, for every game that I've released, there are about 10 people who they will tell you something's wrong with the game. They will give you feedback, and they will often provide a lot of really intelligent ways on how to fix it. But you don't have the time to fix it. It's sometimes not even up to you. It's like, okay, this would be great, but it would require us to go back into this system to fix that too, because it would impact this one, and this one. And they just do not understand that that is not possible to do, that you are too far in development to fix that thing. And instead of being like, oh, okay, I didn't see, they will sometimes go down these war paths. They will become your biggest critics, especially if they have any ability to post videos on YouTube. They will say horrible things about you. They will outright claim that you're a liar, that you're refusing to fix this because of some underlying hatred towards gamers or some ineptitude to development. And you could even argue that, yeah, maybe that they were right that it was inept to develop the system in that way in the first place, but they just don't have no understanding of the fact that you are probably telling them the truth that it would require you to overhaul this system, this system, this system, because you've spent three, plus years with the programmers understanding how things link together and when they have told you no and why they've told you no. So there are people like that that are the most, I hate to say it, but they're really annoying to deal with, where they just do not grasp the concept that you're not lying to them, that you're not trying to hurt their feelings, but that their amazing solution to this problem would have been great to have 3 years ago when you were prototyping the system itself, so that you didn't develop the rest of the game around this not very good system in the first place. And it's like there's nothing you can say. There's literally nothing you can say to quell these people, to prevent them from going down this warpath. It just is what it is. You want a video on how to receive criticism from higher ups who are incapable of receiving criticism, and the criticism they are giving to you comes from something they do. The video on how to receive that is either to shut up or leave. That's true, but there's been a few too many examples of where developers say something isn't possible for just a few weeks later being fixed, so I think that's what leads gamers to think that way. I think you're right, Pixel Shake, yeah, and I think that there's probably a good mix of that. And I don't blame them for not knowing, and I don't blame them for not trusting developers. Because, we've been talking here, and I could go on for a whole rant about how game developers will just openly lie to players in order to not cause a fuss, in order to not miss a sale, in order to insert any reason here. I mean, even Baldur's Gate 3, everybody's favorite Larian, probably lied about the upper city. They said it was going to be there. It's in the map. I have the deluxe version of the game where it shows all the places you can visit, and it has the upper city. I think I know the reason that they didn't include it, and it was probably because of complexity and time and money. And they just didn't say it because they didn't want to cause a controversy. But that still is kind of lying by omission, in my opinion. It is what it is. You could say that maybe they've earned they've earned that generosity, they've earned that looking on the bright side of things, or that benefit of the doubt. I still kind of see it as the same thing, where instead of just telling players the reality, you're withholding some information, and you're going to end up having to pay that price in the future at some point. The best thing to do is just not to lie to players. If you have a problem, you have a problem. If you think that you can't solve something quickly, you can say, well, we'll look into it, but from what I know at this current point in time, I don't think it can be fixed easily. And if you do come back, even like 5 minutes later and discover that it's going to take a lot more time, that should be celebrated. That should be like, you know what? I was wrong. I thought it was going to take 2 weeks. Turns out I just went to programming and they said it would take 2 hours. So we can fit this into the next bug fix. Sorry about that. I was wrong on my information, and good to know it's going to be fixed much sooner than we thought. Like, as simple as that. And there's tons of ways that you can say things like that I think will not cause that controversy. As long as players know that they can trust that you're being honest, even if you don't know something. If you're being genuine, maybe that's a better word to say. If they can trust that you are genuine 100% of the time, they're not going to fault you for being wrong once or twice, in my opinion. Some probably still will. One example I can remember is a developer that had a loadout system, and gamers wanted to have 4 cards to choose from instead of 3, and the developer said it physically wasn't possible, and it never got changed. But how do we explain to gamers that simply adding 1 when you already have 3 is a problem? I mean, if you know a solution, I would love to hear it, because sometimes there are just, you would have to explain exactly how the game is coded. You would have to spend, hours and hours of your time to explain exactly how the game is coded, where refactoring that would negatively impact the rest of your game, and that, yes, you were stupid and you should have done it in a better way when you made the game. But it's not going to happen because it would take too much time for the 5 people that would want it to have 4 cards or something. I don't know. Sometimes there are those things that are so specific, and gamers just don't really understand the complexities of game development, where they think it's easy, but it's not. And it's kind of similar to what I think Tim has talked about in the past, where, just remove encumbrance. Just make it so that things don't have weight. And it's like, okay, well, no. Like, yes, I can press one number in my spreadsheet and set everything's weight to 0. Sure. Export it, import it to the game, make a new build, and weight's gone. Weight's not a factor. But the number of things that impacts and how that ripples out in terms of the design and feeling of the game is so bad that it would require us to refactor all of those systems and user interfaces too, and the balance of things, the loot tables, that this is really not something that we should do. If you want to mod it out, go for it, but we're not going to change it because refactoring the rest of the game is a waste of our time and money. I agree. I don't know how the best way to describe some of those things to gamers who, I think I would love to teach them the complexities and why it's impossible to do certain things like that, or at least it's impossible in the frame of reference of time and money. But that costs time and money to do too, is to sit there and explain it. End up with early Cyberpunk where you bricked your save game if your save file got too big. Man, early Cyberpunk was a broken game. It wasn't even unfinished. It was broken at almost every single reference point, especially on consoles.
But if you do see a lot of frequent criticism of particular features of your game, there's probably something wrong there.
That too, I know. I'm sorry, Tim, but that too. We mention it, many times here. You can't change your game for one person who has a problem. And sometimes the best thing to do as a designer and for the health of the game is to just sit and do nothing and see if more people have that problem. If it's just that one player, especially if it's like something with like balance or feedback, then probably you don't want to change it. I mean, if it's super easy to add like an option for the player to turn something on or off, yeah, you can consider it. But if it's just one little balance critique that would take like, I don't know, 2 weeks to kind of fix and, adjust everything else and get the localization updated or whatever the hell, sit and wait and see if more people have that problem. But again, I think that's where communication helps, where you can say, okay, we are monitoring this problem. We know that a couple people have had the problem before, but we need some more feedback before changing it because it's possible that your issues with this might be in the minority. But some players, again, it's just like, it's a crapshoot if a gamer is going to see that and say, okay, I understand, or be like, you just don't want to fix it. You're just coming up with excuses not to fix it. You would rather work on this new feature, which, it's just our team working on it, but design is needed to fix this bug. So it's not really relevant that you're wasting your time. You would rather waste time on this new feature than spend time fixing the problem that I have. It could go either way. It really could. You don't know who you're dealing with. And like Tim says, sometimes it's a bad day and sometimes there are just people that are like that.
And like I've said before, those people may not have a good idea of how to fix it, but they can certainly smell out that something's wrong. Mm-hmm. Also, they're often talk about what they did like about the game, so you learn a really balanced thing about this is what people like doing, and then this wasn't fun to do at all. Now, I've seen a lot of game developers basically make the argument of game development's hard, implying that hard work is above critique. And I see other developers make this mistake all the time. They read a review and they're like, I'd like to see this reviewer make a game. He's
Just know, by the way, if you're a developer and you ever write that in a public space, you're done. You are cooked. And you might be able to get away with it if the individual who's giving you that criticism is hated by the community too, right? If everybody is jumping on top of that person, maybe you can get away with it. I promise you though, if you ever use that in public, even if you would like to see it, you've kind of lost. Like I don't think there's any positive outcome that can be had by jumping on your community and shitting on them. I mean, even as much as I love, Warhorse Studios, I think that Daniel on Twitter calling people grifters and bots really isn't a good look for the company or for him as a person, as a developer. So just don't do it. Just avoid it. And the better that you respond, by the way, taking the high road in this case, being the better person and trying to respond with class and care and patience will only make you look better to people who are jumping in to see how you respond to people who have the worst criticism. They may hate this person. They may hate it. They may maybe do like, dude, shut up. Stop it. The developers are trying their hardest. In which case, I recommend don't say anything at all. or try to respond to that criticism in a fair way, right? Like, if you don't want to build a toxic community that jumps on people who have criticism, which I think is a very good thing to try and achieve, then go in there and be the mediator, be the person that says, okay, I've seen this criticism, let's not try to attack other people here. I understand that this is a controversial, this is a hot issue. Here are some of the reasons we have it, right? So you are setting an example for the community that you want to have, and you need to do that by being a very patient, very well worded individual. I know it's not always going to happen. You're going to have bad days too. But never jump in and say, I'd like to see you try and make a game. There isn't anything positive that will come from that. Love to see that customer cook this meal. Like, you can maybe say it back in like the the developer locker rooms, right? That's the locker room talk. That's the smoke test level talk, if we want to put it that way. But leave it out of the public scenario. Don't do it.
He's never made a game before in his life. How dare he review mine? It's what reviewers do. Customers gonna review your game too.
It's what customers deserve. It is their right. They have paid money. They have expectations for your product. It is not wrong for them to have problems with that. The customer is always right doesn't mean that the customer is always right. It means that the customer has a right to have their problems. This is their opinion. You can make what you think and what 99.99% of people in the world think is the best game ever. But that doesn't mean that that person who hates it is wrong. That's their opinion. They get to have it. They paid for it. And it is their right to do it. Don't silence it. Don't attack it. Try to respond to it as fairly as possible. And if you really can't make any progress with it in a constructive way, say, I don't have anything else to add to this. I've tried to explain this. Maybe there's a better way to do it that I can't communicate. But this is all I have to say about it for the moment. Just find some constructive, fair way to end it that doesn't make you look bad, doesn't make the company look bad, and if people seem to see that this is just a problem person in the community, they will take care of it themselves. I usually play RTS games with this game called CC, not an RTS, so it totally sucks ass. I mean, at that point, I would just be like, well, why did you buy the game that clearly says it's an open world RPG? But they will exist. You can do your best with marketing, you can do your best with setting expectations for the customers when they buy your game, saying this is what our game is about. It is not about these things. Do not buy it if you expect these things. And there will still be people that buy it and expect those things. You're right. Those types you can shit on. I think those types, the best thing to say is that this game is not for you. That this is not an RTS game. This has never been an RTS game. I'm sorry that you feel wronged. If you put in a request through Steam, I hope you can get your money back, because this game is not meant for you.
Customers do. They review product. I even was once told at work, I got pulled aside and I was told, hey, look, that guy worked really hard on the feature. Don't critique it. And this was in a game I was, quote, the final word on. I was responsible for. And when I was told that, I remember just looking at the person who told me, who technically was my boss. He was above me in the chain. And I just said, look, effort does not equal greatness. I appreciate the effort, even if I don't like the result. Yeah. But we can't leave this in the game. It's got to be fixed.
I put in over 1,000 hours of effort into Golden Chronicles, and it still sucks in a lot of cases. Don't critique this person because they worked hard. Well, I can appreciate the amount of time and effort this person put into making this thing, but it doesn't change the fact that it is shit. Your grass sucks. It does kind of suck. I do wish we had better grass. I can't accomplish it. Like, there are some things I can't do. I suck at doing, and I can either spend a year learning how to do it decently, or I can spend a year getting better at the things that I know how to do. I'm sorry, I'm going to spend the year getting better at the things I know how to do. I can always work with somebody that augments my shortcomings.
And that idea that if someone worked really hard on something, you shouldn't critique it, things just don't work that way. Now, you can be careful.
I know you're
how
Mimi
you
Drummock, don't worry.
your critique.
You should care about how you phrase.
Will be received better if you phrase it. But you have to be aware, because I've worked with some people like this. No matter how you phrase it, they will always take the critique badly.
They shouldn't be in a team. I'm sorry, I hate to say it, but guess what? If you can't take critique badly, what the hell are you doing working in a team environment where communication is so important? It's not saying you can't learn, but if you're not learning at a reasonable pace, I can understand juniors, vulnerability, again, too, like bad days. I'm not including these sorts of cases where you just had a fight with your partner the night before, you come into work, you're aggravated, you're stressed, you're anxious, and you blow the gasket at a stand-up meeting. Why the fuck do I have to be the person to fix the balance? I'm always doing this shit. Fuck. If you're that kind of person, I get it. It happens. It's a bad day. I'm not gonna be like, okay, we need to get rid of him. But if you are constantly the person where that is your way of being, where you can't even receive it, then you have no. At least in my team, you have no place in my team. And sorry to say it, but you will. If we accidentally hire you, you will be purposefully fired. God, that's such a good phrase, by the way. I just came up with that. That is a good phrase. You were accidentally hired, but now you're purposefully fired. You also need to know how to give good constructive criticism and not just say, oh yeah, it sucks. Yeah, I agree too. I'm fine with like, okay, it sucks. Why? What do you want? When you see my grass, what do you want? What is good grass to you apart from this? Because I think this is okay, but what do you think is better? And then we'll see if it's actually viable to fix this. But yeah, giving good criticism is important. I think that there's a way to. You don't want to waste time, right? In game dev, we all know that. If you're in game dev, the worst thing you can do is waste another developer's time. So, yes, going up and telling them that this sucks is fast, but I wouldn't go up and say that. I would say, I'm not a fan of the grass. I think that you could say the coloration's good, and I think it really fits with the rest of the foliage, but there isn't enough variation in this. Why is that? And maybe the designer says, well, okay, so we did that for these gameplay reasons. You're like, okay, that makes sense. Maybe though we can get the level artists to paint different variations of grass around non-gameplay elements, right? Like maybe the edges of rocks, maybe in some open fields, even just in little clusters to provide a little bit of variation in the height to give the landscape a bit more than just this flat look. Okay, there. I've pointed out where I think the variation can go. I asked information about why we have this grass the way it is, and then I adapted my recommendation based on something that I think would not impact the initial need for the grass to be short, while also still providing the variation that was intended. Accidentally hired, purposely fired. Fucking grass. Need the lore on the grass situation after this vid? Oh, okay, yeah, I'll put the grass. I think that I handled the criticism okay. And not perfectly, but I think I handled it all right. Just kept going and going and going.
They will talk about how hard the work was, or how bad the design specification was, or there will be whatever reason to deflect away from the fact that the final product isn't good. And by the way, this applies not just to game developers, to the people who comment on YouTube channels, including this one. I see some very bizarre comments, and then when people reply saying, I don't think the game says that, or I'm not sure that's what they intended, or you're sure you're not reading into that, people will state their opinion, and I've said this before, they state their opinion like it's fact. Mm-hmm. And all I can say to people like that is, you don't come across as a very thoughtful person, and you will be rightfully critiqued if you just state your opinion like it's.
I agree, but I think that there's. It's ego, right? So, often I will be very confident about my views of something and my opinion on something. But I usually preface this or aphasis this, I don't know, whatever comes at the end with, I might be wrong. Because I'm confident that I'm not wrong, but there's absolutely a possibility that I am, right? So, detach people from effect, that's really hard to do, though. But I agree that's the ideal. That is hard to do. People should learn how to be their own critics. I always critique my systems, then go and make them better. What the fuck is this shit? It sucks. I agree with you, Drumux. I mean, I think that's one of the best things that I started to do as a game designer, was to critique myself the harshest. Like, man, this system sucks ass. But, it's a good start. We'll see what the players think, and then we can refine it from there. And I think that that helps to open up the door for other people to critique it too. Like, oh, yeah, I had this problem with it. And you know, if they can see that you are the first person to be your biggest critic, they feel like you're somebody that can receive criticism well. That's not always the case. You might just shit on yourself, but then, you know, blow your gasket at other people who, you know, give you criticism. But, you know, you do want to try, especially with like juniors who are vulnerable about voicing criticism because they fear that they might have retaliation. In a lot of cases, they do. Being the first person to voice that, or openly going up and saying, what sucks about this? Like, I'm not a big fan of this and this and this. What are your feelings? Do you also feel that way? Do you like these things? Maybe I'm mistaken. You know, just open up that conversation, that dialogue. And you often find that juniors in the industry are very, very wanting to give their criticism and feedback. And they want to test that because they think, well, I have a problem with this. I felt like I didn't want to, you know, bring it up, but they want that validation. Are they right or are they wrong? Are they missing something? And that's now a learning moment that you can use with that junior. I don't like the system. It is a bad system, but don't attack creator. Let them take responsibility. Yeah, I agree. And I think that most people who are reasonable in this industry will take responsibility for the things that they caused or things that they know how to fix. Even if it was caused by someone else. They'll be like, oh, yeah, that issue, I can fix that. Even if somebody caused it. It's like, you're not pointing fingers. You're just like, okay, that's a problem. I know how to fix it. Fix. Done. And maybe the person will come up and say, "You, dude, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause this problem." It's like, yeah, whatever. Everybody causes a bug at some point. The next time I cause one for you, we can call it even. If I go through ideation phase, prototyping phase, then a quick play phase, so I can get a feel, if it feels good with it. If not, I tweak it. That's smart. Doesn't really fit in, I just scrap it. People need to learn how to let go of some things. Yeah, I agree with that too. I agree with that.
Engraved in stone. And I actually enjoy watching that happen. So it's it it amuses me that somebody can be so sure that their opinion is right that they just are like, here it is, engraved in stone. Because even the stuff I'm giving on this channel is just advice, and it's pretty narrow advice. It's like, hey, you want to get into game development? You want to make RPGs? You want to make non-linear RPGs?
Yes.
That's what this advice is for.
Oh,
So
that's us.
if you've watched the video up to this point, I hope you understand what my advice is for receiving critique. It was one word: listen. That's all you have to do.
You sent
You just
some
have
out.
to listen to the critique, listen to the feedback. You can aggregate it, see if there's a lot of commonalities. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's out in left field. You don't have to act on every bit of feedback, but if you're getting a lot of the same feedback, you probably do want to act on it. Anyway, so that's my advice on how to receive critique. Listen to it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. If I had anything to add here, I don't think that Tim missed it, but things to add from my own experience with dealing with like communities, because you know I got my start in modding games, right? So I modded for Darkest Dungeon. I made a big overhaul mod for it, and I ran a you know the initial unofficial Discord server for it with like 3,000 people. Don't recommend that, by the way. It was horrible. But what I learned there is that communication is key. Most people give criticism, even if they're good at it or bad at it, because they want the game to become better. Very few people are there just to maliciously attack you for something being shit. If they hate something, most cases they will just turn it off. They will say something bad about it in some other forum, but they're not going to take the time out of their day to confront you about it, especially because they probably have no plan to play it again. It's a waste of their time. So, you know, communicate when you are listening to things, when you're fixing things, why you don't fix certain things, and how much time it might take to address certain problems. And eventually, this stuff will propagate throughout the community. So you will learn that, or you will find that people will say, oh, well, he doesn't fix this problem because of this reason he mentioned before. And now you don't have to say anything. You've saved yourself time. But also that the way that you communicate and the way that you address these problems is part of the way of catering your the culture of your game and of your community. If we were in here just, I don't know, shitting on developers left and right, or which we still kind of sometimes do, but mostly I aim it at practices rather than specific individuals. But if we were just, you know, having horrible takes in here, being rude, you know, accepting hatred and doubling down on it, then that's exactly what our community would become. If we were a community where I attacked gamers openly and they attacked me back, everybody coming into the community would just feel that and be attacked too. And that's, one of the most important parts of creating a community is to create the community that you want to have new people jump into. And if you have those people who welcome new individuals, who help them, and you have dedicated spaces for helping new players and players with problems, it will just be so much more welcoming and enjoyed. And one angry customer can hurt your review score. One happy customer can help your review score. Setting that precedence by listening to feedback and addressing it in a fair, decent way can change a bad review score into a good one, or at least prevent somebody from writing a bad review score. Every little bit matters. All of it. Fight us. Hot take, some customers are really entitled. Some developers are entitled. Some people are entitled. I agree. You aren't going to change the minds of some individuals. But I do think that there is a quantifiable effect of responding to feedback well in a public space as a game developer. There's a quantifiable effect that has on your review score. Even if it's 1% or 2%. Guess what? If your game is rated 68 or 69, nice, percent, that 1 or 2% could push you over the limit to become mostly positive. And I promise you, if people see the yellow versus if they see the blue, that affects sales 100%. So, I mean, better safe than sorry. Just don't respond openly at all, or hire a community manager that can be that front. But if you are good at managing a community and responding to feedback from customers well, I think you should be there. And players like to talk with developers. They like to have them right there in the open, and it's one of the reasons why we have our we have our Discord where you guys can jump in and just talk directly with us, like me and Katzber. And when we get funded, we will have all the developers in here too. It's also where we do our development itself. We have our internal chats for games. So when we have something cool to share or something cool to post, we'll just post it for you guys in the general chat or something, or in some forum. We're right there for you. We're having our business discussions there, and if you need us, we're right there too to respond to feedback or problems. You would like to stay at 69 though? Go for it. Go for it. Make a game. Make a game called 69, and the entire purpose is for the community to keep the review score at 69%, and sell it for $1. You'll make money. It's stupid, but you'll make money. Where's the locker room dev chat in the Discord? I don't often complain about you guys. I don't have any complaints. In fact, you guys are so amazing to help me through all these problems on stream, to help building this community. I don't have a problem. Sometimes I will complain about like a conversation we've had that's just like, I didn't want to spend 3 hours today talking about grass. That was not very productive. And then I just mentioned that on the stream the next day, like, hey guys, can we not talk about grass for 3 hours today? Thank you. I appreciate it. Either way, this was a good video. Here's the link in chat if you guys want to go give this a view and like. Please do it, because Tim's videos will get pushed to more people, and he will get more money and make more videos for us to react to. And of course, as usual, thank you, Tim, for giving us permission to make these reactions. Very nice of you. Hope you enjoy them if you ever watch them. So take care, YouTube, and catch you on the next one. Bye-bye, YouTube. Bye-bye.